This is Gemara Pesachim Daf Ayin Gimel as we close in on the end of this sixth parak. Today's shir should be as chos, refuah shleima v'chaim mitzvah Moshe ben Esther Rezel. You should have a complete recovery. Of course, all the other chaylim chaim minchas ben Magid Meir ben Yikir man ben Meiko Michel Sipon Naslei Lehu v'chaim ben Sarah Shalom Siv ben Rezel Eito Sarah Bas Kenendo the Basim was Chayesay Yisrael ben Indalei Zebrezel Shavalei Shem Bas Naami. Ba'ashav Afiga Rashir Chana Rafal Dav ben Itari Shmuel ben Tila Daniel ben Chana Rezel Mukachaya Bas Mina Li Bracha Bas Tobia Musa B'Soy Shar Chayli Yisrael. We pick it up in the bottom of Ayin Bezim and Bez. We sort of read to the end, but let's just get a bit more clarity. So we're going to pick it up from the Elokir of Yeshua, which is approximately 12 lines from the bottom. The first word on line is Diti Noikis. Anyone who's looking at the screen, you see that we just highlighted the key terms of that which we're discussing just to get ourselves back into ththings. Then we have the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said that if someone is Boil Nida, then you're going to be Chayiv. However, if someone is Boil and Nida, who is the Yavama, you're going to be Potter. The simple reason is why? Because you're doing a mitzvah. So this was the Makar that we're trying to prove that Tard Bidvar mitzvah is going to be Potter. But the problem is, all of the Makaris that we try to prove this in Rabbi Yochanan, as the Gemara said, Rabbi Yochanan Keman, each one was a case where there was Bahala, where there was a lot of things going on, and maybe that was the reason why you were Potter, but maybe not just because you simply were tarred in a mitzvah. So the final attempt that we said was Elikir of Yeshua, the Truma. Of Yeshua of Truma. What's of Yeshua of Truma? The Tanam we learned in the Mishnah. You're eating Truma and someone tells you, by the way, you're Ben Gusha Ben Chalutza, meaning you're possible to eat the Truma. So Lezer Machayev, like because you're Ben Gusha Ben Chalutza, Karen and a Chaimish, because you caused a Gehanim loss, you have to pay the additional fifth. Rabbi Yeshua Paiter, Yeshua says you're Potter. So that says the Gemara. So this seemingly you're trying to do a mitzvah, and that's the reason why you're going to be Potter. Says the Gemara, no, don't Rabbi Bibi Barabaya, don't Rabbi Barabaya, be Truma, Barav Pesach, Lizmanabal. Talking about eating Truma and Erev Pesach, regular Erev Pesach category. It's a lot of Bahala, it's a lot of movement, everyone's busy shechting the Karma Pesach. So maybe that's why you're a Potter. Inami, a secondary. Shiny Truma is different. Why is Truma different? Dikri Avoida, it's called an Avoida, service of the Beis HaMikdash. V'Avoida Rachmana Echsher. And the Avoida, the Torah says is kosher. Titanan, Haya, Oimiru Makri, B'naidim Shem Gusha Bechalut. So the same case, but now you're doing an actual Akrava, an actual Avoida in the Beis HaMikdash. Kol Akarbanais, Kulan, Jekrib, Al-Gabi, Mizbeach, Sulin. All the Karbanais that you did is possible. However, Rabbi Yeshua Machshir, Rabbi Yeshua says it's kosher. Why? My time with Rabbi Yeshua, it says in the Torah, Baruch Hashem Chelai, Upal Yadav Tirtzeh, the Paul Yadav, the work of your hand, Tirtzeh, Hashem desires, Hashem's going to give you the kapara. And if you look at the last Rashi points out, Baruch Hashem Chelai, that we're learning out from here, Chalalim Shabai, referred to someone who is a Kayin, that is possible. So we see from over here, says Rabbi Yeshua, that if you're a Kayin, that's possible, but you tried to do the Avodah, Hashem accepts it, God forgives you. So it says the Gemara, maybe the reason why in this case you're a Potter has nothing to do with Torah B'Bar Mitzvah. It's a special din about Avodah, a special din about Truma. Says the Gemara, Truma Hechekri Avodah. How do we know Truma is called an Avodah? The Tani learned to the Brisa, 3 lines to the bottom. He missed one day in Yeshiva. L'Shachris in the morning, Matzah of Gamliel found the number of Gamliel Abba, says Mr. Beis HaMedrash. Where were you yesterday? I was doing that Avodah. Amar like what? Called Rachamino different tema. What you're saying makes no sense. Where's the Avodah nowadays? Amar this is what we mean as we turn along to today's Daf and Gimel and Aleph. That what Avodah Matana says in the Torah. Avodas matana etin eskunaschem v'azara karev yumas. That the avodah of the matana the kohanim are going to do, and if a zar services you're going to die. Says the Gemara. Darshni this pasuk. Also achilas truma b'gvulim kavayit Beis HaMikdash. For this pasuk we see that the eating of the truma is considered again is similar to avodah the Beis HaMikdash. So Gemara concludes that we have no right to Rabbi Yochanan. We're trying to find out where did Rabbi Yochanan get this concept that Baal Yevim die you're going to be Potter. All the choices that the Gemara tries 4 different attempts. Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yeshua, the second Rabbi Yeshua, a third Rabbi Yeshua, all of them went out the window because each one had a different answer. And the final answer that we're doing today is why? Because it's Mikri Avodah, and there's a special Torah by Avodah that Hashem gives a kapara to a kohen who's trying to do a mitzvah. Says the Gemara 3 lines down. As we conclude the Mishnah, as we conclude the Parak, says the Gemara, Shachtu Shalei La'ichlav. We said in the Mishnah that if you shech the Karban Pesach for someone who's not able to eat, we said 2 things. So in our Mishnah, we said that you're not chayiv in Shabbos, as we'll see in a moment. And we said in our Mishnah, let's say more precisely. Let's go back a moment. We said in the previous Mishnah that what's the halacha? The halacha is that the carbon is pasul. It's pasul because you're bringing it for someone who can't eat. In our Mishnah, we said that you're chayiv, which, as we pointed out in the Mishnah, that it's seemingly the same thing. They're parallels to each other. That if the carbon is going to be pasul, then what's the halacha if you do a carbon psula? If you shech such a carbon on Shabbos, so seemingly the halacha is that it's going to be chayiv, that you're over malacha Shabbos. You did a malacha. What malacha did you do? You did shchita for no reason. So says the Gemara, shchita. It's obvious. Once even the asam pasul, once we know that it's pasul, it's not a good carbon, of course you're going to be chayiv, chayiv. Answers the Gemara, Mishra the Tanya Seifa, you know why we had to see this for the Seifa? What did the Seifa say? Potter, Tani Reisha Chayiv, because there was a different case in the Seifa that said Potter, which we're going to get to in a moment. So it said the first case that you're Chayiv. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? By Nami Pshita. The case in the Seifa is also Pashit. Mishra the Hasam Kasher, Hacha Potter. What was the case in the Seifa? That when you shechted for some people good, some people not good. Arul, Tameim, Tamei, Tar. So in that case, what's the halacha? The Shechita's Kasher. So if the Shechita's Kasher, of course, by else you're not going to be Chayiv in Shabbos. That's also Pshita. Says the Gemara, since we started off the Mishnah and we spoke about a case of Shechita, therefore, Taninami, so therefore just continued and said the case of Shalei Lo'ichlab, even though seemingly we're learning right now that it's completely unnecessary. Says the Gemara, V'gufa lamali, and how do we know this? Misham dekava leflugi d'Rav Yeshua. So basically, at the end of the day, why do we need a whole Mishnah to teach us yesterday's daf? To teach us the machlekes of Rav Yeshua, the machlekes Tayyib and Dvar Mishnah, the machlekes that Rav Elazar said that you're chayiv and Yeshua said that you're potter. That is the reason of the Mishnah. Once we got into that, so then we agav that got into all these other cases, even though they're truly necessary. Unnecessary. When you go in front of Rav Rika, ask him the following question. Someone who says mekalkel in chabura, that's someone who holds in the machlekes every malacha on Shabbos does it have to be constructive, or is there potentially a deraisa even if it's destructive? So this man Damra holds mekalkel b'chabura. If someone does a destructive act, what's the halacha? He's always potter because malacha Shabbos is only chayav on constructive acts. So someone is mekalkel, he ruins b'chabura, he causes a wound, but he does it in a destructive manner. The halacha is going to be potter. So says the Gemara, according to that shita, how do we learn our Mishnah? In our Mishnah it says, if you shecht for someone who can't eat it, you're chayiv. My tikein, what is the takana that you're doing? Again, let's get the question very clear, because we're going to have many applications of this question in the next few lines. Again, the question is a shita in Gemara Shabbos that holds the only chayiv melecha Shabbos on constructive acts. But if you do something destructive, then there's no melechas daraisa. It's also it's an issa derabanan. There's no melechas daraisa. So says the Gemara, according to that shita, how do you learn our Mishnah? It said in the Mishnah that if you do a shechita for someone who can't eat, it's an issa daraisa. Why is it an issa daraisa? Because you're doing shechita. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? True, you're doing shechita, but it shouldn't be a daraisa because there's no constructivity to your act. Answers the Gemara, no, there is. Tikenim alu yardu. There is a takana. What's the takana? That at the end of the day, this animal was called an animal that had a shechita done it, and therefore the halacha is that if you brought it up on the mizbeach, you don't have to take it down. If you bring up a random animal, didn't have a shechita, didn't have anything done to it, you're not allowed to leave it on the mizbeach. But this animal, since there was a shechita done, albeit it was a shechita that was possible, it was a shechita that's done on Shabbos, but therefore there is a level of constructivity to it that it could be left on the mishkan, and that level of the constructiveness of the malacha makes you be over a deraisa. Says the Gemara, let's go to the next case. We said if you shecht and you find the animals of Baal Mum, you're chayv. My tikein, again, what takana, what constructivity is there to that act? You just shechted an animal, there's nothing that you did. Answers the Gemara, tikein, bedukin, Shaba'ayin. The kind of that you did is in the case where there's a Dukat Shaba'ayin, there's a cataract in the eye of the animal. The Amar, on such a case, on such a level, Mom, and Yardu. Similarly, on such a Mom, if you did a shechita on it, which you shouldn't have done, but once you bring it up to the Zich, you don't have to take it down, and therefore that's something that's constructive, and therefore you're going to be Chayiv. Shachtu minimsa treifa, the third case, Beseser. You shechted, you found that the animal was a treifa, but in an internal organ, something that you could not have known about. In that case, we said it's potter. What's the obvious implication? If it's a treifa, something that you knew about, then it's going to be an Issa Daraisa. Says the Gemara, same question, my tikein, where's the constructiveness of the act? Answers the Gemara, tikein laiti midei nevela. So longer nevela. So if someone would eat it, which you shouldn't do, if someone would eat it, which you could do actually, No, you can't do because it's a treifa. But you won't be over eating an avela, different isurim. So there's a level of constructiveness that at least is not an avela. Mask Ravina, as Ravina. How did Tana reach onto the brace? Hashoichet chatos b'Shabbos b'chutz lavay dezara. This guy got it all. He did a shchita on Shabbos, which is a deraisa, and he did it outside of the base of Mikdash, and he did a lavay dezara. 3 isurim. Chayiv alav gimel chatayis. 3 deraisas he was over. Says the Gemara, but in this case, my tikin, where's the constructiveness of the act? You didn't do anything. You did a shchita, but there's no purpose of this. Amar Rav Avir shemaitziyam the Eivrim min achai. So long your Eivrim min achai. At least there was a shchita done. Again, it removes the isra of Eivrim min achai, and action. And as you can imagine, on every level of the Gemara, the reason why it doesn't give the previous level, those are kachem dinim. For example, in this last case, it would be considered an avela, just want to be considered Eivrim min achai. Each one, the previous teretz doesn't apply to. Says the Gemara, shachatu v'naida. What happens? You did a shchita and then you find out, everyone jumped ship. There's no one left in your carbon. So you effectively did a shchita of a carbon for no people. Amar Avuna, Amar Avashi, Amar Rav, I'm sorry. Asham shenitek l'riyah, v'shachatu stam, kasher la'ila. Okay, so what's this talking about? We have a carbon asham. There's 2 times a carbon asham potentially could go awry. 2 times that you messed up your carbon asham. As Rashi, if you look at Rashi directly, it says, Shamesu bailu when iskabru bacher. Either if the owner dies, or if the owner, for some reason, needed his carbon asham for a certain avera, and he did a different carbon asham. So now we have an asham, we have an animal sitting here with no purpose, because the owner is not here, or the owner already got a kapara. So what's the halacha? Halacha is you take this animal, you're nitik l'riyah, you put it out in the pasture, you let it sit there and let it graze until it gets a mum, and then once it gets a mum, then you go and you sell it, and then the money that you have, you use to buy karbanos for the mizbeach. What type of karbanos? You use as dessert on the mizbeach. Rashi explains what's the dessert, and you never want the mizbeach to be left idle. So any times that there was no karbanos being brought, they would use these funds. They would have a special box at Beis Hamikdash, and when they use these funds to bring carbon oilos with those funds. So it says the Gemara, that's what you should do with the carbon asham that has this issue. But now the question is, v'shachatu stam. Before it got a mum, you went and you shechted the carbon. What do you do with this animal right now? Says the Gemara, kosher layla. Since if you wouldn't have shechted it and it got a mum, what would you have done? You would have sold it and used the money to buy an oila for this dessert, this kayetz on the mizbeach. So too says the Gemara now, if you went and you shechted it early before it got the mum, you as well could go and use it as an oil on the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, what do we see from here? Alma kasavar loy akira, a concept that we saw already yesterday. That you don't have to cognizantly and purposely uproot the carbon. This animal was an asham, and you went and you shechted this animal. We're saying now you could go bring it as an oila. We see you don't have to physically change it from the asham to oila, and automatically de facto it changes on its own. Iyachi, says the Gemara, kiloy mitignami. So even if you did not put it out to go pasture, we should say the same thing. What should we say? We should say that you have this carbon asham. Again, the owner died or the owner got a kapara. So what do you do with this asham? You leave it out to the pasture to get a mum. Says the Gemara, 1 second. If you're telling me that you put out the pasture, then someone came and did a shchita before it got a mum, and the halacha is it's a carbon oila. Why is it a carbon oila? Because it doesn't need a cognizantly change it from an asham to an oila. So why put out the pasture at all? Just go take it and bring it as an oila. Answers the Gemara, Gizira la'acher kapara atu lifnei kapara. We're afraid. What happens in a case where you already got a kapara? I'll do lifnei kapara. Let's say you didn't get a kapara. A regular case, you have an asham sitting here. In that case, can you go and bring that asham as an oila? Of course not. It's carbon asham. What do you mean? But in the first case, you're able to. Because the first case, the bailam already got a kapara, or the bailam died. So in that case, then we said, what are you allowed to do? You're allowed to go and take the first carbon, and you're allowed to bring it as an oila. But says the Gemara, if we were to allow you to do that lichatchila without putting out the pasture and getting a balmum and selling it and bring the money to the Beis Hamikdash, and then that money using to buy the oila, then we're afraid you might go do it even before the owner gets a kapara, and that would be a terrible nishul, because that would be possible. Din number 1. Umanat timra. Where do we know this? Says the Gemara. 8 lines to the bottom. The Tanai we learned to the Mishnah. Oh, Sham Shamisa Bailov. Oh, Shanischabru Bailov. Carbon Asham. Case we just spoke about, the owner died, or got a kapara. Yerashi style. If you make it, put it out in the pasture until it gets a mum, you sell it, you blue double in a double, and the money goes in the double. Rav Eliezer Aimer Yamus. No, you have to kill such an animal. Rav Yeshua Aimer Yimkar, you sell it right away. V'yavi b'dam of Eila, v'yavi b'dam of Eila. And with the money, says Rav Yeshua, the most makel opinion, you don't have to put out the pasture right away. You can sell it and bring the money to Beis Hamikdash. B'dam of it, I'll be gufay. Why can't you go and right away take this animal and bring it as an oila? You know why? Because kapara, atu lefnei kapara, shema mina. They were worried about such a concern, and therefore you have this carbon asham. What do you have to do with it? You got to put out the pasture, and the money goes to Beis Hamikdash. If and the owner dies, in the case the owner dies, if the owner already got a kapara, and then you went and you brought it as an idol, which you shouldn't have done, then it's going to work. But you're only allowed to do that b'diavad. Why not? Because we're afraid you're going to come to do it even in cases when the owner did not get a kapara. That's case number one. Eisei Rav Chisda Ravuna. So Rav Chisda asked Ravuna, Ravuna, you just taught us a klal. What was the klal? Loi bayi akira. That karbanos are able to change from the asham to the ayla even without uprooting it lahedya. Says the Gemara. What about the following case? And now you understand why we brought down this case. Because what happens if you shechta the karban? And then what happens after you did the shechita? You find out that you have no more people on your carbon. Why do you have no more people? Because everyone jumped ship. Everyone left the carbon. That's the case in our Mishnah. Vitani Allah. And what do we learn in the Mishnah? During the week, what do? You have to burn it right away. So now the Gemara explains. According to you, Rav Huna, what did you just teach us? You just taught us that what's the halacha? You just taught us the halacha is that bayakira, loy bayakira. I'm sorry, one more time. And not like you, Rav Huna. If you tell me that you have to go and on your own, go and uproot it and change the carbon. Hi Pesachu. This is a carbon Pesach. Came in the last lay bailim. Havle pesula begufai. Therefore, there's no owners left. So there's a soul in the carbon intrinsically because there's no people on the carbon. Therefore, I'm matalachi. Sorry, miyad. Got to burn it right away. Elo, I asked the Gemara now in Rav Huna. Eli, Amr loy bayakira, mereisha. And if you're going to tell me according to Amr loy bayakira, according to you, Rav Huna, that you don't have to uproot this animal. Mereisha avle shlamim. Originally, it was a shlamim psulai. Once the people came off, meaning it's not a shlamim. Everyone's wondering, what do you mean shlamim? No, it's not. It's a Pesach, right? Says the Gemara, but according to Rav Huna, that karbanos automatically change when you have no choice. So what's this? This is a Pesach. But the moment that all the people jump ship and go to a different carbon, then what happens? The Pesach automatically becomes a shlamim. So says the Gemara, automatically it's a shlamim. So why is this carbon puzzle? So why the Bryce say you have to burn it? Seemingly the only reason why you have to burn it it's because it doesn't become a shlamim automatically. It maintains its status as a Pesach. Says the Gemara, maybe what are you going to tell me? Misham davar acher. For a different reason. What's the other reason? Because the reason is because you shechted it after the Tamid. We know that a carbon Pesach is allowed to be shechted after the carbon Tamid shall be in our bayim. But that's only the carbon Pesach. But this animal is no longer a carbon Pesach. What is it? It became a carbon Shlamim. But when did you shecht it? The time you're supposed to shecht the carbon Pesach. So maybe the reason why it's possible and maybe the reason why you have to burn it right away is because you did a shechita at the wrong time. Says the Gemara, it's not true. But any time where you mess up in this regard, the halacha is you have to let it change. The animal has to lose its appearance, and then you get burned. Then you burn it. The Tanya, as we learned in the Brisa, zaklal kol shepsule begufay. Any carbon which is intrinsically possible, you start miyad. Then you burn it. Betam ubebaylim. But if there's an issue with either the blood of the carbon or if there's an issue with the owner of the carbon, then two arbet surasai, yatzal beis asreifa. Then what do you have to do? You have to let it lose its form and then it gets burnt. So if you're going to tell me the whole issue over here is what? That you shechted it at the wrong time, then what would that halacha be? Leave it, let it get smelly and moldy, and then burn it. But the fact that the Brisa says you have to burn it right away is a kash and Rav Huna. Why? Because Rav Huna said automatically the carbon changes from being a Pesach to a Shlamim, but we see clearly it's not true. Because if automatically it came clearly from a Pesach to a Shlamim, what would you do? You'd have to let it lose its surah, lose its form, and then burn it. For the fact the Brisa says burn it right away shows us that you need to cognizantly and purposely go and change the carbon. And since you didn't, what is it? It's a carbon Pesach. It's a carbon Pesach without any owners. So then the halacha is you burn it right away. Kasha on Rav Huna. Says the Gemara, Ella, you know what's going on over here? Ella lo tema, don't explain shachatu stam. Don't explain that the case is that you shachted it stam, rather l'sham ayla. Sorry, lo tema shachatu stam kasha l'sham ayla. Ella ima, what's the case? Shachatu l'sham ayla kosher. The case is that you shechted a random oila for as a regular carbon oila. That's the case where we spoke about. Again, where are we coming from over here? We're coming from the case of Rav Huna Marav. We're coming to the case of Loi Bayi Akira because in the case was that you shechted the carbon asham as an oila. So therefore the Gemara wanted to say we have an issue. The Gemara now is asking, no, that's not the case. The case in Rav Huna Marav is what? Shachatu stam, you shechted a carbon asham with no intent, stam, and then what? L'shum oila. Then it works as an oila. That's not the case. Meaning, again, let's make this clear. Originally, we thought what was the case? You took this asham and you shechted it without a brain. So you said it works as an oila. Says the Gemara, no. You know what's going on? Shachatu l'shum oila kasher. That the case is you shechted it for, you had das for it to be a oila, and therefore that's the reason why it works. Says the Gemara. Now let's explain this. Alma. So what do you? Now we just flipped the coin. Alma by akira. So that means that you need an akira. Meaning what? The Gemara is changing, and the Gemara is saying the case is not that you took the asham and you shechted it and automatically becomes an oila. The case is you shechted the oila as an asham. The asham as an oila. Meaning you had das for that. So now we see the opposite. Alma. What do we see? By akira. That you need to uproot it. Ask the Gemara. According to Rav Chia bar Gamda, the Amar Nizkru Mebia Chaburu, we said it was thrown out in the base Medrash, meaning the following statement was made. Kigoyin v'amrin, they said, to me a mason, that the case in our Mishnah is where the Bailim were Tamei Meis, V'nitcha the Pesach Sheni, and therefore the owners were pushed off to the Pesach Sheni. Hayu Debaya Akira. So what comes out? It is only in that case that you need an Akira, you need to uproot it. Haba Alma, Loi Baya Akira, but in a regular case you don't need Akira. Michael and Meimar, we see clearly the way that the Mishnah on Talmud Gimel Amud Aleph was explained. Over there we explain that what? The case is only because the Bailam were Tmei Mesim. But it sounds like if not for that case, you would have to actually uproot it. What's going on? The opposite. We seemingly in a regular case, you would not have to uproot it. What's going on? We just explained that you need to uproot it. Answers the Gemara. Elo Amar Rav Huna, Breid Rav Yeshua, Acha b'Mayaskina. What's the case? Go Shefershu, Kaidim Chatzos. The case over here is a unique case. That the Karban Pesach was separated before Chatzos on the 14th. And then what happened? And do Meisu Bailim. And then the owners, Meisu Bailim Achar Chatzos. The owners died after Chatzos. The Avalei near the Vinidches. You have this middle ground, even in between or over here. It was as a Mizbeach, as a carbon, and then it was pushed off. So what do you do in this case? In this case, it's special. In such a case, it never comes back, and that is the reason why you have to burn it right away. I mean, we're giving you different tarets. The reason why we said on the top of the Amid, the top line, the reason you have to burn it right away is because of a unique case that's stuck in the middle. It's partially good, it's partially not good, and that's the reason why you have to burn it right away. Says the Gemara, Midu Taima. Is that the reason? El Rav, that's the reason for Rav. The Rav says that's not true. Rav says that Bali Chaim were never pushed off of a carbon. So what's going on over here? Says the Gemara, Elam Rabbah, you know what's going on over here? Hamani Rav Eliezer, it's opinion Rav Eliezer, Damar, if other people, if someone shechs other karbanos shoichet acherim l'sheim Pesach as a Pesach, what's the halacha? Pasul. What's the reason why they're automatically that it's going? It's going to be pasul. What do you mean? 1 second. We just said a second ago that on its own the carbon Pesach should become a shlamim. So why in this case it's going to be pasul? The havalei psulei begufay, because it's an intrinsic soul. Says the Gemara. So that's the reason why. That's going to be different. Meaning, we just answered that Rav, you can't say what you just said. Why? Because Rav holds Bali Chaim were never pushed off. Says Gemara, you know what the answer is? The answer is that over here, there's an intrinsic soul. Says Gemara, 1 second. V Rav Eliezer, we're going to conclude with this, and we'll finish the parak tomorrow. V Rav Eliezer, but according to Rav Eliezer, Chatas Nami Mechayiv. According to Rav Eliezer, then you should also be Chayiv to bring a Chatas when this happened on Shabbos. So unless the Rav Eliezer, Tayyib B'Dvar Mitzvah. That was yesterday's whole discussion. Rav Eliezer doesn't hold the Tayyib B'Dvar Mitzvah. So why aren't you going to be chayiv on Shabbos? Ella says the Gemara, you know what's going on. How are we going to resolve the brisa with the statement of Rav on Rav Huna Merav? El Tigmar Rav Yosef ben Rav Deriv Sal Chasida Kamid Rababa Hamani Yosef ben Chunai. This is Yosef ben Chunai. What does he hold? It's not in there to the Mishnah. Oymar Nishchatim. If someone shechs l'shem Pesach l'shem Chatas, someone shechs for a Pesach and a Chatas psulim. The halacha is, if you shechted you had both kavanas, it's going to be pasul. Alma, what do we see? It's an intrinsic soul. And that's the reason we have to burn it right away. But in the case of the Petur, when you exempt it from a carbon chatas, when you're trying to do a mitzvah, he also Rav Yeshua, who says Tayyib our mitzvah is yes up to her, and we're going to pick up from here from Rabashi tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll conclude the perek, and then we'll move on to the 7th perek, Mirza Hashem.